Hi, Dr. H here with Family Centered Parenting. Today I want to talk about something a little bit more general. And I was prompted by a recent cover on Time magazine. This was the October 23rd issue. And the cover, and I'll show it to you, and it says, "Growing up is harder than ever." Wow. Picture of a child, and there is a story in there. The instead of a full article on it, there's a brief introduction, and then there are pictures and the stories of young people, preteen to teenage years, generally speaking, about some of the stress that they're going through in their lives. For example, here are I'll give you some of the quotes. It feels a little less safe than it used to be. Everyone's just trying to figure themselves out. I wish adults would be more understanding. I was trying to suppress the feeling of being insecure. Okay, that's what these young people, their candid expression of what is bothering them, what's causing their anxiety or their discomfort, their lack of feeling safe. So I started thinking. My first question that I asked myself, and I think that all of us, what's different with today's generation than previous generations? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is the pandemic. And given my gray hair and my number of years working, it's pretty obvious that before the pandemic, I pretty much had the sense that, you know what? I've seen it all in my lifetime. I've experienced almost a little bit of everything. But frankly, never experienced a pandemic. So the pandemic and closing schools and the fear and the constant news about deaths and mortuaries being filled up and bodies going into trailers because they had no room in mortuaries or where to bury them. I mean, that is a huge impact on this generation. There's been studies now about the loss of schooling, and as it turns out, obviously, the most disadvantaged children before the pandemic are the ones who've suffered the greatest academic losses. So yes, what's different than previous generations? Certainly the pandemic and the aftermath of the pandemic, including parents working at home. It's just part of the whole pandemic lifestyle that we all had to cope with on different levels. The other, political turmoil. Well, maybe it is pretty bad. We had the January 6th riots at the Capitol, election deniers, the number of lawsuits back and forth, what's going on in Congress. The political turmoil is quite severe and unsettling. Social media challenges, huge. Previous generations, certainly when I was bringing up my kids, there was no social media. Had to worry about sharing the phone extension. That was it. We didn't have computers. We were just beginning to have some very primitive video games, but nothing like today. Also, school violence. We did not have the mass shootings that we've had in current generations. And the things that go on in school right now, the drills, the lockdowns. So even though the percentages, the incidents of school mass shootings are relatively low, the preparations, because of the horrible consequences that these incidents bring, there's certainly the atmosphere in schools. Every school has lockdowns, security officers, drills, all of these things to respond to a potential school shooting. Cyberbullying, the idea that someone could trash you hundreds of times through hundreds of people, maybe thousands of people will see the video or the Facebook that's stressing you. So the negative impact of cyberbullying is more widespread. So many more people have experienced the consequences of being bullied. The next is sexual identity. Good, bad, or indifferent, we didn't have a lot of choices. We didn't feel the same degree of choice about sexual identity. And that's, from what I can gather, has caused tremendous confusion among young people, especially teenage girls. The choices, now with all the labels, binary, non-binary, queer, LGBTQ, the alphabet of different things, eliminating names. One town in California, they no longer called manhole covers. They're now maintenance covers because we don't want any sexuality. We hear stories of parents leaving, choosing gender up to their children. I don't want to get into a whole discussion of whether that's right or wrong, but the idea of forming a more liberal, open sexual identity is part of the growing up experience today. Climate change. Now, we've known this has been around for a while, but the issues of climate change have become so much more acute in the last few years because of the horrible storms, the power of the hurricanes, the flooding. Climate change is now much more in the mainstream. And our kids are looking and they're hearing these doomsday stories of as our planet in the tipping point, what does it mean for their future, jobs, etc. So that's all part of what's different. But then again, we need to ask ourselves honestly, what's the same? Well, there were bullies. Bullying is not new. The difference is how you get bullied. In my day, and I guess in my children's day, it was more a physical threat. Way back in my day in elementary school, we bullied by notes. If you wanted to put someone down, you wrote a note. Boy, is Mary looking frumpy or ugly today? And and Susan will pass that to Lois, and Lois would pass it. Before you know it, 10 or 12 girls in the class are giggling over a note that was bullying Mary. Well, it's still bullying, and the person who's being bullied is going to feel the shame, the frustration, what to do about it, whether it be a physical response, an emotional response. It's still bullying. The challenges of coming of age been around a long time. The ancient Greeks wrote about the problems of puberty in teenagers and how tough it was. This is not new. Puberty is just part of the human experience. The hormonal changes that come with puberty, the different rates, girls going into puberty at an earlier age than boys. Boys tend to do it more slowly than girls. What does it mean for if you go into puberty earlier than your peers? What does that mean for you? How do you feel about yourself? These are not new. These have been around as long as we're human beings experience our biology. And our sexuality, we had to learn. Many of us learned the hard ways through misinformation and sources that were not accurate. Today, unfortunately, kids have access to pornography and way beyond what was the age that we were experiencing sex, but the idea of who I am as a sexual being is not new. That's part of the growing up. And then let's talk about political turmoil is not new. We've been around, those of us who grew up in the 60s, the riots, the Vietnam era, the Cold War, the threat, the Cuban Missile Crisis, divided the Gore-Bush campaign, where Gore got more popular vote, didn't win the presidency. These things aren't really new. So political turmoil, the disgust with our politicians, lack of trust with government, these things have been around for quite a while. So there we are with the dilemma. Is it truly harder to grow up than ever? And I've pointed out things that are different, things that are the same. But really the question is, it is a perception. So it seems from that Time cover story and the comments of the young people who contributed to that story is that they believe it's growing up harder. So whether we as adults could think about, oh, gee, if they only knew what it was like when I grew up and dismiss it, that's the wrong approach. It's their reality. And we have to confront their reality rather than our own adult sense of what the reality is. So what can we do about it? And that's the question that I want to tackle a little bit today. The first thing is being a good listener, active listening. Our kids need it more than ever. By being heard, by having their feelings respected, it leads to their empowerment and their ability to cope with the world. Now, I've emphasized before in communication, validating our child's behavior or emotional stress does not mean agreement. It just means we say, for you, if your child is crying, instead of immediately getting rid of the tears, saying, you must be really upset. You seem quite upset with what's going on. Tell me about it. By validating the feeling, you're opening the door for dialogue, for discussion, for problem solving. If you just try to either dismiss it, minimize it, or make it better, you're going down that road where you're just turning off your young person. And this is especially true with teenagers. As we know, anyone who's raised teenagers, they tend to be a period of time, they tend to be emotionally volatile, they tend not to be making great emotional decisions. Sometimes they misread a particular emotional cue. They might think a friend is ignoring or dissing them when that's not the case and they're upset. But first you got to validate what they're feeling is real for them. It's very, very powerful. Another thing we could do about parents, as parents, is being honest about our own growing up. Relate the fact that, I didn't get to be an adult unless I went through being a teenager. I did go through puberty. I did have to define my sexuality. I did have to figure out who I am in this world. And now it's a fine line. We have to show that we understand that we did walk in those shoes. We did walk in their moccasins because we were young and had to grow up. And we're also honest about some of the struggles and decisions, and even about our own mistakes. As parents, especially when our kids get a little older, they have a really good nose for BS, for things that aren't quite right. So we need to be honest. And being honest about our own growing up, about our own confusion, maybe a mom could talk about their own struggles with eating or their body image and looking at magazines and seeing the models and wanting to be that way. Or I had my Barbie doll and they're all skinny and they're beautiful shapes and I always felt awkward. By revealing that and talking about that honestly, especially with our teens, that makes them feel gee, I'm not the only one. Not only are my peers going through it, but wow, my parents went through some of these issues. And they grew up and they got better. So I feel a little bit better about having the tools to meet those challenges. Also, without being a Pollyanna, let's look at, are there any silver linings? For example, the publicity about severe weather has a positive impact because now the issue of climate change has become more real to more folks. When you get more rain in one day than previously in a month, those statistics are meaningful. It makes us think about what's really going on. How come that 100-year, the storm that occurs once every 100 years is now occurring once every 10 years? So these are all things that lead us to say, yeah, there's some bad things happening, but it's also made us more aware of what we need to be paying attention to. So when we're having a discussion with our children about what's going on wrong with the world or what needs to be changed, if there is a silver lining, let's point to it. Let's show that the human spirit and the human ability can rise above and sometimes meet these challenges and bring some innovation and change that are useful. We also should remember that history, and there are milestones as a society where we can show progress. Yeah, we have a lot to go with racial justice, but in my lifetime, there was Jim Crow. We saw scenes of violence against young people who were demonstrating to just be able to use a restroom or a drinking fountain or get served at a lunch counter. These are all images from my lifetime. Wow, we've made some real changes there. There is more equality today. We still have a way to go, but there is more. The feminist movement has made tremendous strides for women. Title IX has opened up a tremendous world for female athletes. To accept being a female athlete, to be a jock, is a high status thing for most young women today. These are all positive things that have occurred in society. If you look at the data, there's actually less poverty around the world. There's less hunger. There's less disease. So regardless of the bad news out there, when we offer our children some historical perspective to show that in the long run, with maybe we're not where we want to be and we still have many challenges, we are probably better off than we were. So here we are. We're faced with some reality of children feeling that growing up is harder. We know that more and more kids are labeling themselves as depressed, anxious, or seeking therapy and counseling, which in the long run is good. But let's remember on the other side, growing up, we sucked it up more. There were generations, maybe we had a little bit more resilience, the ability to cope with the negative aspects of what's going on in the world. It's a fine line. There are no easy answers, and I'm not pretending to offer them. But I'm offering us a chance to have a realistic dialogue about the issues that are facing our young people today, and especially to be open and honest with our children when we discuss these issues. Because the only way to relieve that stress and to cope with it is to have that good, solid relationship based on open and honest communication with our kids. So I'll leave you with that, a reminder of family-centered parenting. In my book, we discuss a lot of these issues in terms of especially communication, honoring our children, empowering them without losing our power. And also I urge you to look at our website, that's our old one, familycenteredparenting.com, and of course the YouTube to see these videos. So for now, take care and enjoy talking to you. Bye-bye.